think yeah, okay. Welcome to the top 10 of 10. My name is Daniel Wright, writer of ProductLake.com. Today is May the 15th, and these are the top 10 stories, or should be. Wait, no, they're here. Story number 10, fast food workers strike for higher wages. This is from USA Today. New York, hundreds of fast food workers walked off their jobs in dozens of U.S. cities on Thursday, reportedly forcing at least a few locations to temporarily close or restaff while mostly managers filled in, as sympathetic protesters in several dozen countries joined in a united call for wages of $15 an hour and the right to form a union. No violence was reported early Thursday. Restaurants such as McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and KFC are being targeted. The strike targeting the $200 billion fast food industry at a time of intense competition. Intense competition says who? Is aimed at directing consumer attention to the low wages of those fast food workers. The one-day campaign continues protests launched 18 months ago. Strikers claim that managers opted to close down a Burger King in Dorchester, Massachusetts, where a half a dozen workers were striking, but Burger King officials could not immediately confirm that. During this time, customer service and quality will remain a top priority of Burger King restaurants, the company spokesman said. So there's another fast food strike for $15 an hour. The strike's organizers says that the fast food giants have the money to pay reasonable wages. Quote, at the end of the day, there is more than enough money to pay these workers $15 an hour, says Kendall Fells, the 34-year-old organizer of Fast Food Forward, who marched with protesters in New York on Thursday. 2/3 of the workers are women, and most of them have children, he says. Quote, they're just trying to support their families and make ends meet. In Europe, Lorenz Keller, who works for the Swiss trade union Unia, said that members from his group were protesting outside several McDonald's branches in Zurich and would soon start actions in Geneva. He said that while wages were relatively high in Switzerland, so was the cost of living. Some protesters were wearing, quote, sad hamburger costumes, he said. Also in the Philippines, so there's in Japan. How about that? So big fast food workers strike for higher wages. Story number 9. This is from industry. And the looting of the pensions of thousands of public employees, particularly those in New Jersey, or the appropriation of said funds is one of the proudest moments of what used to be the promising political career of Christie. Now the scandal has entangled Charlie Baker, the likely Republican candidate for governor up here in the Commonwealth, God save it. Baker, who lost to Deval Patrick the last time around after running a very bad campaign, appears to be in this up to his eyeballs. This is a block quote here, but Baker's campaign acknowledged Tuesday that his firm, General Catalyst, directed some of that money toward a health insurance company that he oversees as an executive in residence at the Cambridge-based investment company. The investment first came to light last week after it was revealed that Baker had made a $10,000 contribution to an ally, Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey. For years, Baker was the golden boy of our local Republicans. He was well liked even among independents and right-leaning Democrats. For election cycle after election cycle, people waited for him to jump in. When he finally did, he spent months stumbling around like a rookie while Patrick maneuvered him outside of what already was a very thin margin of error. Now, with Patrick retiring in the Democratic primary free-for-all, the ground for a Baker revival seemed even more favorable than it was last time, but this is the classic downside of the businessman candidate. The upper levels of American business, particularly in the financial services sector, are shot through with amorality and social irresponsibility. When those levels intersect with the country's politics, the corruption leeches in both directions. When brought into politics, the wink and a handshake ethic is fundamentally undemocratic. When it's become business as usual becomes political poison, and Chris Christie is what results. That and the very real victims about whom nobody ever thinks. Story number 8. Glass holes at work. If any single event thus far has perfectly encapsulated up the public's relationship with Google Glass, it was the Bay Area bar fight which made Sarah Slocum a minor celebrity. A few months ago, Slocum made headlines by claiming she had been assaulted by anti-glass zealots in a San Francisco bar after she entered wearing the device. The alleged attackers seemed to have been motivated by a mixture of class resentment and privacy concerns. Various bar patrons recorded on Slocum's glass are even eyeing the camera warily, and one woman accuses her of killing the city. Slocum, for her part, is less than conciliatory and sneeringly refers to the woman as white trash. Both Slocum and her attacker seem to agree on one thing: glass is power. To the other people in the bar, Slocum appears as a spectator of San Francisco's VC-funded Nouveau Riche, equipped with a device that intrudes on their right to privacy. To Slocum, the white trash are bitterly resentful of her cool new toy, and not savvy or resourceful enough to get one for themselves. Either way, the person with the Google Glass is the one with the upper hand, at least until the proles of the Mission District resort to fisticuffs. Glass's reputation as a source of power for the wearer is partly a function of clever marketing and partly a function of the device's current retail value. Early adopters shelled out $1,500 per unit during Glass's initial limited release. These adopters, referred to by Google as explorers, were, of course, paying as much for the privilege of being on the consumerist vanguard as they were for the product itself. When Google Glass received a wide release, the price will drop significantly, as will the prestige associated with any device. And once that happens, it will finally become obvious who really has the power. Yeah, it's pretty lame. It's gonna make life considerably worse for people, as most of this technology ultimately does, though no one seems to really appreciate that. Social theorists call this digital terrorism. Okay, so yes, and it's going to get really annoying. Wearable tech is coming to the American workplace, but not as a status symbol. Instead, the workers of the very near future will likely see it as something as much closer to an albatross. Yeah, they'll track you and they'll look through your Google Glass and say, hey, you're not doing as much work as you said you were doing. You're playing video games. Get ready for the electronic plantation. Story number 7. Decades later, military still unable to account for its spending. This is from Stars and Stripes. The military is still running behind in its decade-long quest to audit its spending and rein in waste. Department of Defense comptrollers testified Tuesday to the Senate. Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps financial managers will be unable to fully meet a midpoint deadline set by the Secretary of Defense this year for mandated accounting benchmarks. Meanwhile, quote, serious continuing deficiencies, unquote, remain in the accounting efforts, according to a Government Accountability Office report. Yeah, they're not. Nearly 3 decades after U.S. taxpayers gasped over $640 toilet seats and other Cold War military waste, the Department of Defense remains the last federal department still unable to conduct a financial audit, despite laws passed in the 1990s that require the accounting. After another era of military buildup following 9/11, Congress mandated in 2010 that the DoD be ready for an audit by 2017. Former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta set 2014 as a deadline for passing some initial accounting tests. Quote, meeting this goal has been more of a challenge than I expected, said Robert Hale, Undersecretary, Chief Financial Officer for the DoD. We've made more progress in the last few years than any other period. Making progress. Hale and others said they were determined to eventually be audited during testimony before the Senate and Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. We understand after 20 years of unauditable financial statements, Congress is skeptical about DoD's progress. Yeah, 20 years of unauditable financial statements. That would lead to some skepticism. That's a good call there, bud. Oh my God. Okay, this story's too funny. I gotta move on. But yeah, so surprise, surprise. Department of Defense still unauditable. Unauditable. Story number 6. Twitter's Bond girl outs herself as Kentucky official. It's from Bloomberg. A Kentucky official identified herself as Twitter's Bond girl, an anonymous tart-tongued commenter on municipal bond matters with more than 8,400 followers. I changed my name on my account, Christie Culpepper, who heads the Kentucky School Facilities Construction Commission, said yesterday in a telephone interview from Frankfort, the state capital. I felt like it. Culpepper declined further comment. Her almost 24,000 Twitter postings began disappearing yesterday. Bond girl, using the Twitter handle MuniLass, @MuniLass, had been posting commentary about state and city borrowing and issues beyond public finance. Since April 2011, her sometimes pointed posts attracted the attention of municipal bond investors, bankers, and analysts using her nom to Twitter. Culpepper sparred with others, criticizing public officials, and vented about her life. Would see my arch nemesis is retiring, Bond girl wrote in a message 46 days ago. So I finally reallocate all the money I was saving for a hitman. Culpepper is regarded as an authority on capital projects and debt by the legislative body, according to a Kentucky Education Department website posted in November that announced her appointment. She has worked with legislators, lobbyists, and attorneys to draft legislation and effect policy changes related to the state's bond indebtedness. Fascinating view. Culpepper, a member of the Junior League of Louisville, has undergraduate and master's degrees from Baylor University, a Baptist school in Waco, Texas. Kentucky's social media policy tells employees when blogging or commenting about work, individuals should use their real name, identify that they work for the Commonwealth, and be clear about their role. Kentucky state government has a policy, Pamela Troutner, a public official officer for the state's finance and administrative cabinet, sent an email. Given this and recent developments with Mrs. Culpepper, we were reviewing the matter. Bloomberg News contacted Culpepper by phone yesterday after she revealed herself in a Twitter post that said bond buyer newspaper had figured out who she was. Views I have expressed do not represent those of my employer, Culpepper wrote in a posting. Muni Enigma. Buyers and traders in the $33.7 trillion Muni market had puzzled at the true identity of Bond girl. Hector Negroni, a co-founder of New York-based investing firm Fundamental Credit Opportunity, said in a telephone interview, "For any bond geek like myself, she's fascinating, well-formed, entertaining." On October 28th, as Bond girl, she wrote a 1,650-word blog post for the Financial Times Alphaville on a proposed debtor in possession financing for bankrupt Detroit. The loan should allow the city flexibility to extend the maturity so as not to put the city at risk of locating a replacement lending facility if its bankruptcy and recovery do not reflect the ambitious trajectory that the emergency manager is selling. Her posting range from such critical analysis of deals and politicians to musing on her personal affect. Not sure what I was thinking when I got dressed this morning. Looks like I'm in an action movie. She also engaged in direct conflict in one exchange. Bond girl criticized Kate Long, a Reuters columnist, a frequent nemesis, comparing her with Meredith Whitney, an analyst who in December 2010 predicted a wave of defaults that never occurred. I'm now unfollowing anyone who puts Kate Long's idiocy in my stream. No exceptions. Worst source of information on Muni's apart from Whitney. Long expressed appreciation yesterday for those who stood by her. Thanks to everyone for the message of support from the abuse I got from recently self-outed MuniLass. You've been tremendously supportive. So there you go. There's a little Twitter drama playing out in Bloomberg. Speaking of drama, story number 5, and it will also be, I think, 4. Jill Abramson forced out of the New York Times. There's a question of why this happened. It's still unclear. So, well, let's get into it here, I guess. The most august newspaper in the U.S., the New York Times, was left reeling on Wednesday after its executive editor, Jill Abramson, was fired and replaced by her deputy less than 3 years into one of the most exalted jobs in journalism. In a move that caught even the most senior staff of the paper unawares, Arthur Sulzberger Jr., the publisher and chairman of the New York Times Company, announced that Abramson would be replaced immediately by Dean Beckett, the paper's managing editor. He is the first African American to hold the job, although that milestone was likely to be overshadowed by the sudden dismissal of the paper's first female top editor. When she took the job in September 2011, Abramson, 60, said it was meaningful that a woman had been appointed to run the newsroom of such an influential organization, and her removal is now certain to be perceived as an example of the glass cliff. That's a thing. Facing women in high journal. Yeah, there's nowhere to go but down once you get to the top. Duh. In a brief statement released by the New York Times, Abramson pointedly commented that under her watch, our masthead became half female for the first time, and so many great women hold important newsroom positions. Abramson's exit was unexpected and almost brutally abrupt. She left without dressing in the newsroom, was taken off the paper's masthead within a few minutes of staff being informed of the change, and reports suggested she will no longer work for the newspaper. As news dripped out about the lead up to Abramson's firing, speculation about the reasons behind Sulzberger's decision began to focus on her recent attempts to hire Janine Gibson, editor-in-chief of Guardian US, to act as a managing editor of the Times alongside Beckett. Oh, that would do it. The Times, in its own account of a day of high drama at the top of the institution, reported that the move to woo Gibson had escalated the conflict between Abramson and her deputy. On Wednesday night, Gibson, who was recently appointed editor-in-chief of the Guardian's global website, confirmed that she had been approached. She told Guardian, the New York Times talked to me about the role of joint managing editor, but I said no. And now we'll go to story number 4, which is a sort of a different or invitation to a beheading. This is from Capital New York. How Times editors learned of Abramson's ouster. Please come to a masthead department head meeting at 2 p.m. today in the page 1 conference room, 3rd floor. That was a note top editors at the New York Times received this afternoon, summoning them to an abrupt gathering in which publisher and Times Company chairman Arthur Sulzberger Jr. would inform them that executive editor Jill Abramson was being replaced in the number 1 masthead spot by one of her deputies, managing editor Dean Beckett. The shakeup came amid tensions between Sulzberger and Abramson that had been percolating for at least the past few months, according to multiple Times insiders. So apparently, to take this in the last story, there is some tension between her and the publisher. At the end of the day, the publisher owns the paper, so that's not good. And it happened also with her deputy. So I guess that's kind of what the tension was over is kind of, I guess, the question. So, but the news nonetheless came a shock as to most of the assembled editors. There had been none of the drama or widespread discontent that led up to the famous firing of Hal Raines. In fact, when they arrived in the room, their first inkling of what was about to transpire was the fact that Abramson was not present. Sulzberger gave the same vague reasoning for the change that would be relayed in a company memo, and at a full newsroom meeting shortly thereafter that the decision had to do with Abramson's newsroom management. Not everyone was buying it. When Sulzberger said he was sure it, quote, doesn't come as a surprise to you, video editor Bruce Headlam spoke up in Abramson's defense, according to the person there, said, Mr. President, it does come as a surprise to me. This sources recall him saying. 2 other editors who voiced their concern, sources with knowledge of the meeting told Capital, national editor Allison Mitchell suggested that Abramson's firing wouldn't sit well with a broad swath of female Times journalists who saw her as a role model. Assistant manager and editor Susan Chera seconded that notion. Our source, who was in the room, characterized Sulzberger's response thusly: when women get to top management positions, they're sometimes fired, just as men are. Beckett also said a few words, telling his colleagues it would be weeks before he came to any decisions about reshuffling the rest of the masthead. The most pressing appointment would be his own successor, for which Shara and 2 other masthead figures, deputy managing editor Janet Elder and assistant managing editor Ian Fisher, are seen as likely contenders. A bit later, at Beckett's first page 1 meeting in his new role, it was revealed there would be a profile of him in the following newspaper. A glowing profile. Story number 3. Edward Snowden did an interview, I guess, with Democracy Now! The stuff I saw really began to disturb me. In his new book, No Place to Hide, journalist Glenn Greenwald provides new details. Oh, it's Glenn Greenwald doing the interview. Details on Edward Snowden's personal story and his motivation to expose the U.S. surveillance state. Quote, the stuff I saw really began to disturb me. I could watch drones in real time as they surveil the people they might kill. Snowden told Greenwald about this time as a national security contractor. You could watch entire villages and see what everyone was doing. I watched NSA tracking people's internet activities as they typed. I became aware of just how invasive U.S. surveillance capabilities have become. I realized the true breadth of the system, and almost nobody knew what was happening. Greenwald joined the studio, and here's a transcript of the discussion. That's worth looking into if you're interested in that thing. Story number 2. Comcast plans data caps for all customers in 5 years, could be 500 gigabytes. Cable company already enforces 300 gigabyte limit in 7 states. A Comcast executive said he expects the company will roll out a usage-based billing, what most people call data caps, to all its customers within 5 years. Speaking with investors today, Comcast Executive VP David Cohen said, I would predict that in 5 years, Comcast at least would have a usage-based billing model rolled out across its footprint. Comcast, which has about 20 million broadband customers, has rolled out caps to some of the areas that it serves, including Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina. Comcast told Ars Technica that 98% of our customers nationally don't use 300 gigabytes a month. That seems like a lot. I don't know. I guess I got to check out my own usage. Cohen today said that Comcast will raise the limit over time so that the large majority of users won't go over it, suggesting that 500 gigabytes is a possible monthly limit 5 years from now. And the number 1 story, Kiev holds peace talks, doesn't invite other side. And you thought the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks were doomed. The gang in Kiev has decided to conduct peace talks, apparently only forgetting one thing. You have to talk to the people you're supposedly trying to make peace with. Unilateral peace talks seem like a contradiction in terms. However, some of Ukraine's rich oligarchs, as well as the U.S. and EU ambassadors, were in attendance, which only seems fair given their role in overthrowing the previous government and starting this crisis, though it does raise further doubts as to whether these were designed to be actual peace talks. If anything, they were formed to further condemn the other side. Of course, one of the problems with labeling your political opponents as terrorists is it makes it difficult to negotiate with them. Committing massacres, I guess that's like Odessa. Actually, I don't guess. It is. I wrote this. It's a Fire Dog Lake. It is about Odessa. True, the talks are designed to fail, but at least now Kiev can claim they tried to make peace amidst their attacks in East Ukraine. Given how transparently futile the effort is, one wonders why the U.S., EU, and their friends in Kiev even bothered with the charade. The Kiev positive narrative is falling apart, even in sections of the Western press, let alone in parts of the world where journalists are not rewriting U.S. State Department press releases. If this is the best attempt at peace the gang in Kiev can muster, then continued conflict appears inevitable. Yes, these peace talks are a complete joke. And so the story was written. And that's top 10 of 10. If you have a story you'd like me to feature, please tweet me at Dan S. Wright. And be sure to read all the stories at firedogway.com. Thanks for watching. See you later.